Welcome to Season 1 of the Resilient Dad Show. I'm your host, Pat DiDomenico. When I became a single dad and was faced with navigating social parenting issues and the complexity of the family legal system, I felt confused and I felt like I had nowhere to turn. That's why I created the Resilient Dad Show, a place that I so badly needed and wish had been available for me during the grueling and challenging times of working through my own experience. This show will feature industry experts in mental health, social services, and personal development, along with resilient dad role models whose stories of overcoming the challenges of co-parenting will create a new vision for the life you and your kids deserve. If you have any questions or want to suggest a future guest on the show, please visit resilientdad.fm for more information. Welcome to the Resilient Dad Show. Today, we have Collin Mitchell, co-founder of Salescast, but most importantly, father of 4. Collin, thank you for taking the time to come on the show today sharing your story.
I'm looking forward to it. I go on a lot of shows, but I don't get to talk about being a dad as much as I'd like to. And so most of the focus is typically, professional and on the business sense. So This is a conversation that I'm looking forward to.
Awesome. And, you've got a wide range of experience in terms of with your skill set with what you do with Salescast. And I'm sure that that's transitioned to, you've been able to use some of those skills, or even your kids have been able to help you learn some additional skills like, patience and being able to work with, individuals.
Yeah. I mean, patience is something I'm still working on. And your kids will definitely test your patience often. Most of my professional background has been in sales. Whenever I'm negotiating with my kids about bedtime or eating their vegetables or things that you want them to do, I always question if I picked the right profession.
Yeah, they're very interesting. Even from such a young age, they pick up things pretty quickly, and you find yourself, like you said, negotiating with a young child about, something that they want. And you tend to ask the question whether, who's the actual adult or not.
And the funniest thing is, as they get a little bit older, you start to see them using some of your own techniques on you, and you're like, wow, I never taught them that. And they just pick it up, and you almost want to just reward the behavior.
No, definitely. So, Collin, could you share a bit about yourself and in terms of, your journey of becoming a dad, and a bit about, your upbringing and how that has contributed to, the way that you've, become a father and how you parent?
Yeah. So I was raised without my father very involved in my life. I'd see him occasionally, but he, spent a lot of time in prison and had struggled with addiction and things like that. So my mom raised me for the most part. And I had 3 brothers. And so she also, had to work a lot. So there was a lot of, time that I was kind of left to my own to figure things out, and definitely was not an easy kid. I tend to get into trouble and give my mom a bit of a hard time, and life was already not that easy for her, right? We sort of lived check to check, and she was a waitress, and she worked nights, and we grew up on food stamps and government cheese, and, occasionally we couldn't pay the rent and we'd end up in a motel or whatever the case is. My dad never contributed, never really helped, never, he was just really wrapped up in his own stuff, and many, 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 times of disappointment of, not showing up to baseball games, or, showing up late or not showing up at all. And eventually I just sort of, gave up on sort of being let down by him on a regular basis. And so, maybe, there's not being around him was probably a better thing, right? Because then, maybe I would have picked up some of his skills, if you want to call them that.
Yeah.
So maybe it's better that I didn't pick up, some of the things that he did. So a lot of how I parent is like the exact opposite of how my dad was. But yeah, so that's pretty much how I grew up.
That, thanks for, being vulnerable and sharing that. It's, it'd be really, really tough in that environment, especially, having 3 other siblings and, your mum always working and having to grow up, I guess, quite young. Like you said, not necessarily having your dad or seeing things that, you witnessed or in terms of your experience, it gave you the dad that you didn't want to be. So it gave you sort of a blueprint of just do the opposite and you'll be, you'll be on a better path, I guess.
Yeah. I guess, that's a good way to look at it, and, definitely growing up as a kid, it's hard to see it that way. It's like, you just want a dad like everybody else's dad, dad that shows up, a dad that, is there for you, teaches you how to do things. And so there was a lot of, as a kid, just being angry, just really angry that like I had a crappy dad, and, definitely had to like work through a lot of that stuff and find a place of sort of letting it go and doing the work. And, I also really didn't have even a lot of positive, male role models in my life at all as a kid. So there's a lot of things that I just had to figure out. And, I think that as much as my childhood, there was moments that really sucked and were horrible. I believe that, they sort of gave me the resilience that I have and like the toughness and the ability to deal with, things that would, normally stress people out. And, my wife and I have 4 kids. Most people, think like, oh my gosh, how do you have 4 kids? Like that's crazy. I wouldn't have it any other way. Our house is crazy all the time, and that's totally fine.
That's and I guess that's what, problems are, they're good problems to have, in terms of being able to manage and having, I guess all everyone together and that ability to have the kids and, the family time and so forth. That's a really good problem. And there's, some of our greatest sort of, pains or lessons are our greatest gifts. As I say, and it definitely, you show that example. And could you share a little bit about, the things that you did to help you deal with those, whether that resentment and anger as a young child to be able to let go and not let that affect, I guess your adulthood and then you becoming a father?
Yeah. I mean, some of it still creeps up here and there, but, a lot of it was just working on myself, a lot of reflection, meditation, journaling, dealing with some things in therapy for sure. And all of that's been really helpful. I'm a big, person on like routines and structure, probably because of such a like lack of structure as a kid. And so, I model a lot of that as an adult now where, I pretty much wake up at the same time every day, and do certain things to take care of myself so that I can show up, for my kids the way that I want to. It definitely falls short, like often. But because the interesting thing is I find like when I am not as patient as I'd like to be, or, I'm getting angry, or not responding to things the way that I'd like to, it typically has nothing to do with them and everything to do with me. It's because maybe I've fell off my routine or, didn't do certain things that I know that work in order to put me in the right mindset, because I have 4 kids that are 7, 6, 3.5, and 4 months, so like there's a lot that needs to get done for everybody to make sure everybody is taken care of every day. And my wife's amazing. But when you've had a long day and like, people aren't listening and people are crazy, like it's easy to get upset. And so, I wake up early every morning, I exercise, I journal, I meditate. Sometimes I'll fall off the meditation or I'll fall off the journaling. And like, typically that's when I feel a little bit off and my patience is a lot shorter than I'd like it to be. But those are all things that are important, even just eating healthy and sleeping right. A lot of people talk about their morning routine, but it's more of a lifestyle, simple things like just drinking enough water every day, getting adequate sleep every night. I go to bed as a reasonable time so that I can get proper rest to be able to wake up early and do all these things and then go to work and, then be able to show up the way that I want to and be present with my kids.
Yeah. Well, and it's great awareness, the ability to see that the times where you don't quite feel right. It's like, well, what are like you're saying, what are the things that maybe you've dropped off that you normally do? And, like it's amazing that 15, 20 minutes of meditation or even that journaling and so forth can make a difference of just having getting that mindset and giving yourself a bit of a break with your mind. But it's amazing in terms of the importance of that, taking care of yourself and the routine and so forth. So you've just had obviously a newborn that's 4 months. Congratulations. And now that you've had the experience of having 4 children, could you tell us a bit about in terms of that first time that you become a father and that you were you found out you're going to be a dad, and then when the actual your first child came into the world, how that how you felt?
So my wife and I were just recently married, and we were getting our life started, and figured like, hey, let's start trying to have kids now, and a little bit prematurely, like that thought, and we're like, let's just start trying and kind of see what happens. And like literally the first time we tried, we were having a kid, and we're like, for a moment, we're like, oh crap, this is happening. Right. And, then there's just that overwhelming feeling of excitement. And, with our first 3 kids, actually, and I was very against it in the first one. We didn't find out what it was going to be. Right. So if it's going to be a boy or girl, it was a surprise. The day the baby was born. And so my first was my son. His name's Jackson. He's 7 now. And, so we didn't find out. We had basically, went to the hospital the day of, with a boy name and a girl name picked out just, in case. And, so it was a boy. And, it's funny. It's funny how you, are with your first kid versus your 4th kid. With your first kid, like you're so overly cautious about like everything, you just, and then you kind of ease up a little bit after you've had a few kids. You're like, yeah, it's not a big deal. But there's just still nothing that brings more joy than like, bringing a new kid into this world. Yeah,
no, that the first time you actually see that there's an actual human that you've co-created and to bring to this world, it's pretty special. That first moment.
Yeah, it can be tough for dads too, like those early baby days where like they're just kind of a blob that like sleeps and eats, and like you don't get a lot of reaction out of them or anything like that. But then, after a couple of months when they actually like start to smile at you and like laugh and make sounds and like, then from there, there's all these, first time moments, that happen. But, for dads, it's sometimes it can be really hard for them to like bond with a baby like early on.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Moms, not so much. They've been carrying this thing for 9 months. They're like in love right away.
They already have that connection.
Yeah.
Definitely. And so now that Jackson's 7, like what are some of the things that, you've noticed through now that he's at school, in terms of the things that, with you trying to, be the best role model that you can for him and guide him through that next journey. What are some of the things that you've experienced or has been a little bit sort of challenging for you, being a bit uncertain in that new space?
Yeah, I mean, every sort of age brings on new challenges, from the early days when they like depend on you for everything. And you like can't wait to, get them out of diapers or, be able to like brush their own teeth or like get dressed, like all those things, like, oh, those things get easier. But then, now they have opinions about things and personalities and like, attitudes, and so there's new challenges that arise with every sort of like milestone. But it's really cool to start to even see them like sort of develop some of their own things. My son's great. He's a very independent, fairly independent kid. Like he wakes up early. Like, I don't know. He obviously maybe gets that from us. He wakes up early and like makes his bed, like gets dressed, really helps with his sisters and stuff like that.
Oh, that's awesome.
But when you have multiple kids, like there's always those sibling brawls that are constant, which can be challenging. And sometimes I tend to be maybe a little bit more harsh on him because he's the boy, right? It's like, you can't get physical with your sister. And he's like, and he's, from the age of 5, 6, and now 7, it's like, that just doesn't really make sense. It's like, she's hitting me. Like, what do you want me to do? Yeah.
No, definitely. Being the only boy and having 3 sisters, that will definitely be an interesting dynamic for him growing up. Yeah. And, from what you've experienced as a child and now being a father, what are some things that you've really noticed that, are some very common challenges that, that parents have and that, dads in particular, like, we're not taught in school how to be a parent or a dad. And if you have a father that's absent, like yourself, you don't have that role model there. So, what are some common things that you see that are challenging for dads?
I would say one of the biggest things, and this is probably for parents in general, but maybe a little bit more specifically for dads, is my wife and I started reading this book recently that was recommended by somebody, and we've like literally never picked up a parenting book ever, like not once. Yeah. And somebody, a good friend, had strongly recommended this book and then bought it for me and sent it to me. And like, we started reading it. And it's called The Hunter-Gatherer Parent. And basically like, there's a lot in there, but like one of the things that really resonated with me a lot, when we started reading this book was that, a lot of these battles, if you want to call them battles, that you have with your children are, struggle for like control or power, right? You want them to do this, they want to do that. Or, you don't want them to do something that they want to do, and a lot of times, people naturally, and maybe even more so dads, sort of fight that friction with more friction and it just doesn't go well. And so you really have to learn to like really just let go and like not try to control so many things and like choose your battles, I want him to do this thing, but like, if it's not like that important, like sometimes you got to just let some things go and not make them such a big deal. But a lot of people can't, because it's just like they make it so big in their head of like, oh, if I let him do this one thing, or if I let her get away with that thing, then it's going to set the precedent for everything else. And it's just, that's not reality. So learning how to like really let go in some cases and be like, this is not that big of a deal. And, something that my wife and I are kind of always working on is just like learning how to say yes more often. I think a lot of people, tend to need parents specifically like that knee jerk reaction is just like, no, you can't do that. No, we're not doing that right now. And so just really like learning like to say yes more and be okay with more things.
Yeah, no, definitely. Especially when, it's an uncertain environment and experience and relationship that, like you're saying, when you have your first, it's that unknown space. And then eventually it gets a bit easier as in terms of once you get to, your last and, having that control, it's probably something that also that we struggle with in life, and not being able to let go of the things that we can't control and holding on to that and that actually affecting, I guess, our well-being and our in terms of the way that we operate day to day. What are some strategies that in terms of, whether the book or yourself that you've used to be able to just, be able to let go without any resistance in your mind and struggle to let it,
I mean, I would say the biggest things is being willing to just be vulnerable with like other parents and like, hey, this is what's going on. And a lot of times they're like, oh man, I'm dealing with that too. And like, if you can get real with other people and not pretend like you've got it all together and you've got it all figured out and like, you're the, you won the award for best dad ever. Then you'll be okay, cause then, you're going to make mistakes. Like nobody's perfect and parenting is hard. It is. And, and so if you're talking to other people that are dealing with the same stuff, a lot of them probably making a lot of the same mistakes, then you can, sort of have this level of awareness where like, you're not going to be so hard on yourself, right? Not get so down on yourself when you fall short, again, and having people that might be able to share some insights of like, oh yeah, I was really struggling with that before. And here's something that we do that's really working. Or even just, creating some new healthy routines and habits, that other families do that might work for your family. One of the things that, I really look forward to the most that my wife and I do with our kids every night is we just kind of do like a little bit of a review of our day together. We talk about like what the best part of our day was, what, like the worst part of our day or most challenging part of our day was. And then like, and then we talk about one thing that we're sort of most grateful for. And, they have to pick, like, they can't pick the same thing every day. It's got to be like, something different. So just teaching them gratitude and, teaching them that like, hey, we're all going to have tough moments, but like we can talk about them. And then also just talking about like, what the, highlight of their day was. Yeah.
That's awesome. And the ability to share that with your kids at such a young age, it gives them the ability to be vulnerable and open up and have that mindset of, like you said, gratitude. And it's okay to make mistakes and, you'll learn from your lessons and being able to, be okay with showing everything's doesn't have to be 100% perfect.
Yeah. And they, they even the 3.5-year-old, they look forward to it every day, something they look forward to every night. So, and then we also share the same with them, so we're like, show them that like, hey, we make mistakes too. We're not perfect, Yeah.
Well, I'm definitely going to try and introduce that into my family household. And, I think the ability to show kids gratitude for what they have, and, even the lessons is such an important part of life. So they're not always sort of, chasing or just always wishing they just had that thing that is out of reach.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, and if you had one thing, there was only one lesson that you could pass down to your kids, what would that lesson be?
One, man. It's always hard. Whatever the question is, whenever it's one, it's so hard for me to pick one thing.
Most important thing.
Yeah. Most important thing. Just to take it easy on yourself. Don't beat yourself up.
Yeah.
No, I think it's so easy to try to strive for perfection or, want something to turn out a certain way and it doesn't. And then to really get down on yourself. And that's like, can take you to a pretty dark place, So it's like, just don't be too hard on yourself.
Yeah. No, that's a great lesson to definitely pass down. Collin, thank you very much again for your time and sharing your story and your experience and your journey of being a dad. There's a lot of dads out there, as you mentioned, that in terms of don't necessarily open up and are willing to be vulnerable to ask for help or advice on things that that they can do, and we can tend to get pretty hard down on ourselves for not having everything sorted. But it's been a great example for other dads. So I appreciate your time.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me on. Really appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks, Collin. Hey guys, I really appreciate you listening to today's show. It means a lot to me that you're part of the journey and mission to help single fathers be the best dads possible. I'd really appreciate it if you review the show and share it with someone you generally believe could benefit from the content. Please visit resilientdad.com for more content and resources as we build this community for dads everywhere.